Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 352 of the Stacey West podcast. I am Ben, and I'm joined by Charlie. How are you doing tonight, mate? Are you well?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. Hope you are as well, Ben. I was just looking there, and this is going to be really pointless for all of our audio listeners, but I was just looking at the intro that we have on YouTube that obviously plays the music. And obviously we took those photos, about 18 months ago in rugby, didn't we then? And I thought, do you know what? How good would it be to get some fresh photos? You know, I might look better in them. And then I realised, no, actually, I've been living on my own. I had chicken Kievs and potato waffles for my tea tonight. I'm definitely not going to look any better now than I did look back then, am I?
You're living the dream, mate.
I am.
Waffles.
Honestly, it's almost as good as a pot noodle and a cheeky. Well, we won't finish that sentence.
I mean, yeah, obviously tonight you do not have the extremely handsome, as I believe he self-professed on Saturday or Sunday. You don't have Gary tonight. You have myself and Charlie. Very much the antithesis of the handsome duo, I imagine, that we're presenting on Sunday. I don't think we've got any skincare routines to speak of, have we, Charlie?
No, there were skincare routines discussed.
Oh yeah, what? Gary was quite pleased with his new moisturizer, and then somebody pointed out that it could well be the same one that Steve Evans apparently uses, and he got upset. So yeah.
Okay, now, thank you for the reminder as to why I don't bother listening to the pods if I'm not on them. Not to talk about skincare routine. Although, of course, everybody, you should make sure that you listen to us every episode, whether it's me and Ben on, or whether it's Gary and Chris, or any combination. There you go. There's the selfless plug that we have to do as well.
Well, we've got a message there from John. He says, I offered the missus a facial, but she declined. I can imagine why. But yeah. I mean, you know, what's been going on, man? It's been a few weeks since I think we've been on. You know, have you been up to anything? You've been catching anything good on TV? Seen any good movies? Listened to anything decent? What have you been up
to? Done absolutely bugger all. No, honestly, working during the week. It's the typical. It's the working. God, I really miss university and not doing anything. Those really were the days. But no, I've been trying to keep up with a lot of football. I've not actually been going out as much and not been doing as much drinking as I normally do, although I did literally have the conversation with you before we came on air that I was out last Thursday and out on Sunday and out this Sunday. But yeah, I've been doing a good bit of football. I've got a Spanish away day upcoming on Sunday, which I'm very much looking forward to. So yeah, just trialing a few different football experiences out. Because what else is there to do in January? Let's be honest, it's pretty bloody boring. Although we did get some brilliant news from work today. We normally get paid on the 28th of the month, and they've told us that they're moving it forward to this Friday, which means I can actually enjoy my weekend and go out and do whatever I want. So I am very happy with that.
Well, I mean, it is the way, isn't it? You have your December pay packet that kind of covers the Christmas mentalness. Then you have to make your pay last until the 49th of January or whatever it is that you tend to have throughout the month. So that's always good. But yeah, no, it's very much the same here, to be honest. Just work, very much more work. But yeah, I will drop one recommendation though before we get into football, and that is, if you haven't seen Severance, try and watch Severance. It is an amazing TV show, and season 2 has just started, and I'm getting back into it. It's brilliant. It's one of those where I think it might actually appeal to your slightly sadistic side as well, because the idea is you separate your work brain from your personal brain, and then you appear to go, like, basically your outie, as they call it, the person that lives on the outside world, goes into the office, gets into a lift, and then immediately steps out of the lift at 5 o'clock. And then your innie is the person that will come out of the lift at 9 and go back into the lift at 5, and then that's their entire life. Good show. Definitely worth checking out.
That just sounds like a really, really weird version of normal life. Does everybody kind of have a work brain and an actual life brain? Is that not standard?
They're completely separated, so you don't remember what goes on at work. It's great. yeah, right.
Try not to do that anyway.
Well, yeah, that's very true. I suppose that's why you go out drinking 5 times a week. Anyway,
5? Come on, 7.
I was just... Oh dear. So, right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we may as well start talking about football. We've had not a great amount of news coming out of the club this week, although we have had essentially what you like to think of in January. We had some transfer news. Obviously, Gaz and Chris spoke about this on Sunday as it started to come through. We've signed a striker, Charlie, and we've also signed a proven striker with a history of multiple, double-figure seasons. James Collins has joined the Imps from Derby. On paper, this certainly looks like the kind of striker that people have been crying out for quite a while. And it definitely looks like what we've needed in terms of on the pitch and from, what's been sort of read between the lines off the pitch as well. Could well be somebody that's really going to help the younger players come in and coming up around him. So, yeah, initial thoughts, and then anything after, the initial. Oh, we've got a striker. How did it all go from there when it was announced?
Well, to somewhat make an attempt at quoting Mr. Jez George, model? What model? A 34-year-old striker. And do you know what? I'll be honest. When this was first announced, I think there's a certain timeline to a transfer like this, especially one that gets rumoured beforehand, which doesn't always happen at the moment with Lincoln, but one that you kind of begin to know about a day or two before. And when James Collins was first rumoured, my initial thoughts were a little bit sceptical, if I'm honest, because I was kind of thinking, look, if he's going to just be coming in for the second half of the season and we are going to be, I don't want to say breaking the bank for him, but maybe overextending our wage budget a little bit more than what we had kind of planned at the start of the season, a little bit like what we did from John Marquis a few seasons ago, then I was kind of against the move because I'm sort of thinking, what's he actually going to bring? I still don't. I never have done throughout this season. Thought that we were going to be in a relegation battle for the second half of the campaign. Nor did I, and I kind of resigned myself to being happy with the fact that we wouldn't be in a playoff battle per se. So I was like, I don't really think it's going to be worth it. What does he really bring? Is it worth the finances? Blah, blah, blah. And then it got announced, or it got rumoured that it was going to be an 18-month permanent deal. And suddenly my ears kind of fricked up and thinking, okay, now I'm starting to see a lot more positives in this move. And then obviously when he gets announced with that being the deal, again, then it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to take a step back and totally rethink what my original thoughts on this were, because we have brought in a proven goal scorer, first of all, who, yes, is on the slightly older end of the age spectrum, if I can get my words out. But he was still scoring 14 goals in League One last season, so it's not like he's past it and been injured for the past 3 years, and that's the only reason he's coming to us or anything like that. And he can obviously help be an experienced player for the likes of Jovan and Freddie to look up to for 18 months. So now I'm actually really, really pleased with the deal that we've made here. And again, I don't see us in any sort of a relegation battle. So I don't think he's coming to kind of help stop that in a way. I wouldn't say he hasn't come in to help stop the rot, because, when you're on a long losing form, or as we were, granted, even with that one win against Reading just thrown into the middle of that, you do have to bring in a signing to help kind of reinvigorate the side and also get the fan base back behind the side, which I think James Collins has the potential to do, just like what Sam Clucas will hopefully be doing as well since he came in. So honestly, I just think this is a fantastic and shrewd deal from the football club. Mm-hmm. And I think for Collins individually, he's going to see this as an opportunity to, again, get some really regular minutes, especially if Bailey Cadamarteri is out for the foreseeable future as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a few comments coming in. We will get to comments, by the way, that there are a lot immediately. As soon as we went live, everything's just gone mental in the comments. So, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of comments there about experience being key. I'd agree. I think, earlier on in the season, Skibala was saying we are very young in the front line. That front three, that front two of Jovan and Freddie at times, and then with Bailey Cadamartri as well. I mean, Ben House isn't the oldest player on the team either, but when you have a very young forward line, there's sometimes a bit of naivety there, and I think that naivety will be mitigated a bit with the arrival of James Collins. And I think the fact that he's going to be in and around the squad, like you say, he's a permanent transfer. He's not going to be a loan. He's going to be invested. I think it's just going to be a great thing for the younger players to learn from somebody that's been there and done it. I mean, what is it? 25 goals in the Championship when he was at Luton. It's not a bad career to have had so far, and hopefully, he can continue to do what he's done. Anecdotally, I've got a couple of folks at work who are Derby fans, and they've all said, he didn't get the chance this season because of the personnel that they brought in. Maybe they were a bit surprised that he didn't get the chance, given the fact that he was their top scorer last season. So, I think the fact that we brought in somebody that has scored goals at this level repeatedly and has maybe got the experience of having promotions from this level, I think it's going to be it's only going to be a positive for us. And it's interesting you're saying about you don't think we're going to be in the relegation scrap. I've just checked the table again quickly. I think we're 14 points off the bottom four, but we're only 6 points off the top six. So I think even with the run that we've just had, we're still much, much closer to that top six than we are the bottom four. And I think it's while at this point in time, I'm not saying that we're going to be up there in the top six, but we're closer to that than we were. We probably thought we would be after the run that we've just had. So, James Collins signing an 18-month deal. I think it's going to be on paper at least, it's a good signing for us. We'll have to see what comes of it. So that's Collins. Next bit of news. I mean, realistically, there wasn't a huge amount of press releases and stuff coming out of the club, but we did see the minutes of the latest fan advisory board, so formerly the supporters board, now the fan advisory board. The minutes came out, and there was a couple of things in there that I found a little bit interesting. The first one for me was the projected losses discussion. Now, obviously, when I was on with Chris last week, I think I said I would expect to probably see a loss of around 3.5 million at the minimum, given the way that the division's gone this season in terms of finances. I think it's almost like the prep for the bad news, isn't it? In the fan advisory board, where they've said the projected losses are around 2.8 million. So it's not quite as severe as it was last year. I think the headline last year was 3 million. This year it might be a little bit less, but then you've obviously got to remember that included in that we have the sale of Lass and the sale of Lucas, I believe. Those two would be included in this year's figures.
In terms of the financial accounts that will get released, I don't believe that they will be, because that will be based off last season in terms of the next set of finances. Right. However, I do believe that is included in the 2.8 million figure, as that is based on this season's. Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, we're looking at around that sort of a figure. So not quite as severe as we maybe initially thought it might be, but when you're a club that's well run and highly respected by people that know their stuff in this arena, and you're losing 2.8 billion, it just shows that football at the minute is in a really, really sticky spot. So hopefully we can get this governance bill through. But it's I mean, first and foremost, that was one of the headlines for me, and obviously the sort of subhead of that is we still don't have any debt, we still aren't beholden to one individual. The club is in a decent enough place because the money that is being lost is being reinvested in the form of shares. So we're running at a sustainable loss, and that's such a weird sentence. In no other like realm of business would that be an acceptable sentence. But yeah, I mean, initial thoughts on that one, Charlie?
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of kind of discussion around the finances that are in the fan advisory board minutes. Now, of course, I'll just preface this whole kind of discussion as the fact that I'm on the fan advisory board, as is Chris. So we've managed to get some really invaluable insight from being a part of those meetings. We were both attending the last one, albeit me virtually, but both got the exact same kind of out of it and all of the discussion. And honestly, like the minutes show, honestly, all of the key headlines really, really well. All of the numbers, obviously, exactly what we were told and what was discussed. The total income and the total expenditure, I think, are very high numbers when you kind of first look at it. What I think is quite interesting, like you say, the £2.8 million loss. It's always a very worrying number when you hear that, and I think we have to kind of begin to look away, and it's difficult because it kind of goes against human nature to look away from the big number, the big overarching number, because when you're looking at things like finances, especially anybody who knows anything about business, and you just see your overall loss, that bottom line as £2.8 million loss, no matter what discussion you have, it will always inevitably come back to that. But I feel like in football, we kind of have to teach our brains just to move away from that in the moment. We have to look at the circumstances behind that, what that £2.8 million loss looks like. Now, some football clubs in the EFL and further beyond as well will have that £2.8 million loss each season as debt. We do not have that. Now, I also totally get what people are saying as their counter argument, and it's said so often, and I totally understand where this comes from, of yes, okay, but what if those benefactors, those investors, decide to turn the tap off? And just like what you said there, we are not in any way beholden just to one particular person. We specifically made sure to spread ourselves out amongst a group of investors who all come together for the benefit of Lincoln City, which means that if one person pulls out, for example, and again, very much hoping that it's weird. I don't care if the man's 95. I never want him pulling out of Lincoln City Football Club, even if he's only given 10p in a year, just because of the kind of emotional connection. If Clive was to pull out of Lincoln City, we then had the support of other investors around him that, okay, yeah. I don't want to use the terms pick up the slack or pick up the space that was left or anything like that, but they would help us work towards filling those gaps either by themselves or with other people being brought in. And again, there's kind of that long vetting process of, look, you want to give us your money, that's fine, but we need to talk about how you're going to give us your money and making sure that it's right for Lincoln City Football Club and for you as an investor. So when I hear those sorts of numbers, although it's always concerning, in the grand scheme of things, when you look at, first of all, EFL football as a whole, and then the way that we treat those losses, I constantly feel that we are in a good position, no matter what's happening on the pitch, in terms of what's happening off it. Now, of course, there's always going to be ways that we can improve that. The club aren't stupid. They're fully aware of that. And I think that's always one of the key takeaways. And it was again from this meeting back at the start of January, when we're talking about these finances, is you have the likes of Liam at the club who's taken a step back and said, look, we know that we would prefer for this number to be higher or this number to not quite be that high. We are constantly looking for strategies to try and ensure that that is the case. Mm-hmm. But sometimes those things take time. Sometimes there isn't an overnight fix, which is difficult to hear sometimes as a fan. And I get it. I sit in those meetings, I'm like, well, yeah, but why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? And there's always all of these ideas, whereas actually there's probably just as many flaws in those good ideas as there are positives from them. So sometimes it's just kind of taking that total overview of, okay, we can be doing this better. Of course we can. But at the minute, I'm happy with the position that we're in. Yeah. And that's kind of always the feeling that I have.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everybody else has to have that same feeling. Obviously, people will have concerns, and I totally understand that. But it's just about making sure that we are certain about where Lincoln City are as a football club at the moment compared to where the rest of EFL football is.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think the obvious comparisons are, the likes of Wrexham. They've got I know they've got owners that have put in an absolute ton of investment, but it's all in the form of loans. I think some of that's now been converted to shares. I'm not too familiar with the finances over there, but my understanding is that some of it's been converted to shares. But ultimately, if somebody wants to pull out of Lincoln City, they have to sell their shares. They can't just go, right, that's it, I want my money back, give me the money back. This doesn't work like that. There is an investment there, and they would need to find a buyer for those shares. So if somebody wants to walk away from the club, they can do, but they're not owed anything unless they sell the things, which is good. And it's not like we've got one owner that's worth an absolute fortune and suddenly has to find somewhere to pay for his divorce bill, do we, Mr. Vince? But let's look at the next part of the fan advisory board, and this is a question that we put out in the Discord. We said, if anybody's got any questions for us for tonight, let us know. Jay in the Discord says that obviously one of the bigger headlines from it is that there is a proposal in a change to the ticketing structure. So in terms of pricing, obviously at the minute we have a flat model. That's been kind of a badge of, I think it's been a badge of honor for us for a while, to be fair. We've always said we have a single tier pricing strategy for all the tickets. The discussion is that may be changing next season. I'm just going to pull the minutes up here now, but basically it says that would there be an impact on any attendances if the prices were to change? An agreement was needed to balance revenue generation with affordability, and we'd need to obviously acknowledge policing strategies and all the rest of it. We did used to do this years ago, where we'd have category A matches for local derbies and bigger games and things like that. Then it kind of dropped off for a while, but it's always a thorny subject, isn't it? Because as soon as you say, if the team at the top of the table are coming and it's Birmingham or it's Wrexham, it's going to get a big crowd anyway, stick a couple of quid on the ticket price, and then if we get a 10,000 seater, if we get a sellout, we've got 6,000 season tickets, so that's 4,000 tickets. That's an extra 8,000 quid in the coffers. There are additional costs associated with a bigger game, but are we that against it? And I mean, from the discussion that was seemingly had, it seems that it was largely supported. Tiered pricing would be potentially supported as well. Whether that's different prices for season tickets in different stands. So the GBM or GMB, Co-op, Limpave, whatever they're calling it these days, St Andrews, and the Real Mac obviously would have different levels of ticket price. So yeah, it's such a thorny topic, and I think obviously there's a degree of transparency here, but I think there's a discussion to be had, and hopefully they've come to a sensible decision on this one, Charlie.
Yeah, look, I think first of all, it kind of does need to be noted that these are only proposed changes. As far as I'm aware, they haven't even been signed off by the board or anything like that. So they're literally only discussion points at this point in time. However, again, I think it's just about taking it in terms of context. So one of the very first lines at the top of the minutes when it was discussed about the proposed changes was that we are one of the lowest average price per heads in League One. Now that is effectively overall match day income divided by the attendance and kind of averaged out over the course of a season. And when we took that and compared that to the rest of League One and as much data as we can get from them, we are very close to the bottom of the league for that. Now, that doesn't mean, okay, let's just stick an extra tenner on everybody's ticket and we'll make up for that and then we'll be near the top and then boom, we can have a bigger wage budget or anything like that. It's not about that. It's about looking to effectively see where we can make any of those marginal gains in terms of the finances of the club to ensure that we are covering ourselves off against, first of all, increased operating costs in line with inflation and everything else, coming out of, all we have to do is look back to this time last year. We were very much in a cost of living crisis, which of course affected every individual person, but it also massively affected the football club because suddenly their overheads running a match went up by almost 15%, whereas typically they'd maybe only see like a 5 to 10% increase each year. So things like that just very, very, very quickly change the landscape of the conversation that we're talking about here.
Just quickly on that, John Davison says in the comments, the club isn't the cheapest for season tickets. Only 3 other clubs are pricier. The rest are cheaper. So, yeah, I think this is, as Charlie stated, it's not necessarily the number on the ticket. It's the overall cost for the day divided by the attendance. So
exactly that, and it is also bearing in mind for example, that will be comparing certain season tickets. However, other clubs will have certain sections of their stadium which are priced more expensive, some which are priced cheaper. So it's very, very difficult to kind of have that overall balance, whereas we are effectively very near the same. Our top end in terms of a price season ticket and our low end for a price season ticket are a lot closer than what most other clubs have. They will typically have a much wider spectrum on those sorts of things. Now, what was proposed was that, first of all, we would look at potentially having certain areas of the stadium have a slightly increased price for ticketing for new members. Okay, that would be for match day tickets and for new season ticket holders. So therefore, the conversation, as per the minutes, specifically states that effectively, if you are currently an upper 3 co-op upper 3, which is potentially the prime seats of the stadium, then that doesn't mean that you're automatically now going to be charged more than your counterpart in upper 1 or lower 7 or anything like that. Okay, it just means that potentially for new members over the next however many years, they may look at phasing in increases. At that point, again, this was very much the discussion. We would look at supporting that from a fan advisory point of view, and as long as the club did kind of do it within those parameters as discussed. In terms of then, there was also the conversation, like you were saying there, about categorization of matches, dynamic match day ticketing prices based on the games. And that's, if you are playing a Birmingham at home, is it maybe a little bit right that you pay an extra couple of quid than if you were playing a Shrewsbury at home, for example? Now, there are pros and cons throughout that whole debate, and as there is throughout the overall ticketing debate. But again, I think the kind of consensus from our end was, look, as long as the club do phase it in and they do it in the right manner and they make sure that they're transparent throughout the whole process, it's definitely something that we would happily, have the club look into, sort of thing. Also, then there was the discussion, and again, I think this was kind of the overall kind of the overarching comment on the proposed changes was that the club are considering a percentage increase to manage operating inflation, so a percentage increase to season tickets and potentially match day tickets for the next campaign as well. Obviously, there was no discussion on exactly how much that would be. So, of course, it always depends on those sorts of numbers, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm still paying for a season ticket for this season, and I've been to like 2-3 games. But I'm quite happy to pay and have my seat there for if ever I want it. Next season, we'd be quite happy to be paying. And I appreciate that. Obviously, these are always difficult times for people to potentially part ways with extra money on top of what they were maybe expecting. But if that is the case, and if the club do go ahead with that, then I think it's just about putting it into the context of the club's prices rising. How much more do we want to lose? Is it fair that we as fans maybe take a little bit of that on? And again, it's a really, really difficult topic to discuss because it becomes very emotive because it's talking about money. But I mean, from our point of view, it was...
Yeah, I mean, there is a comment from Roy. Hi, Roy. It says, I think the club has to be careful. If they start to increase, people won't attend as many games. So it's a fair shout. Like, as Charlie said, it's an emotive topic when you start talking about how much you're going to be charging people to come and watch your club. It's a difficult one. I think ultimately there is a bit of give and take in it, and as long as they don't turn around and do a Tamworth and say, right, if the team at the top of the league come, you're paying 35 quid for a ticket, that's not going to happen. But as long as they don't go to that kind of extreme, and I think and this I'm going to get pelters for this and all the rest of it, but I think there's enough credit in the bank from the club at the moment to say, okay, I've got a degree of trust in the decision that's going to be made. I remember, quite a few years back, the first time they put out the season ticket renewals in February, it was sprung on everybody. There wasn't like a build up to it. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to release the season tickets in 2 weeks' time. It just kind of happened as a news release one day, and the backlash to that was quite severe. And we actually had conversations about it in fans forums and privately as well. And I think from that, the club realised, oh yeah, if we're doing this, we need to get the communication right. So I think that it does say in the meeting minutes as well, like the communication needs to be bang on for anything around this. And I think they are aware, and yeah, hopefully they can at least get the decision.
And
if not spot on, I mean, it's gonna piss people off, but you'll piss people off regardless of what you do.
And look, I want to very much add to that. I think first, obviously, the quick release of these minutes. Now, we've Fan Advisory Board, we've had a couple of instances over the past sort of however many meetings where sometimes minutes have been released a little bit later than what we'd have maybe hoped, just for whatever reason. Sometimes that just happens when, for example, the media team have to be the ones to put it on the website. They can sometimes be quite busy, especially in January. But the fact that they've turned these around really quickly, obviously, we're really pleased with. And again, it's just the amount of detail that they made sure to put in there to ensure that everybody else can effectively get the exact same insight that, myself, Chris, anybody else on the Fan Advisory Board was able to get. And, I also just want to add on to that point as well. We have actually got a couple of vacancies on the Fan Advisory Board that we will be looking to fill over the course of the next 6 months. So for anybody listening, make sure to keep an ear out for kind of how the process is going to work on that, because we'd love to have as much kind of input from as wider areas of the fan base as possible. So like I say, keep ears to the ground on that one. And as soon as the information is released, I will also be sure to make sure to have a mention of it on the podcast as well.
Super stuff. Right. Well, that's we're 32 minutes in, so I think that's probably a decent spot to dip out for a moment or so. Let you lovely people listening listen to an advert, and for those of you that are watching on YouTube, we will get all the comments in and say hello, which will probably take us about 15 minutes looking at them at the minute. So we will see you the other side of this break.
It's good, isn't it? When we're on YouTube and there's that many people watching. Hi guys, how are we all doing?
Yeah, 42 watching. It's gone up to, I think there's one point it was about 48. So yeah, it's good. Right, let's go from the top. Obviously, the aptly named Flossy Top says, "Hey up, it's me." Ian Wrigglesworth says, "Evening, gents." Dominique saying hello. Steve saying evening. John Booth saying evening. James Harness, gentlemen. John Davison says evening. Andy S, good evening, everyone. Steve Leach, mates, how we doing? Blake saying hello. We've got Roy saying thank goodness. I'm not sure what that thank goodness was for. I don't know. Obviously, we've got John saying his polite offer to the missus was declined. Flossie says, "Don't knock skincare." I'm not knocking it. It was just interesting one to hear on a football podcast. Roy, where are we? Good evening, chap, says Neil. Ian says, "Football, please." I'm guessing that's at the point I started talking about TV. That's fair enough. Yeah, then
I was the same.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about. I just want to talk about Severance, man. It's so good. So yeah, Ian says experience is necessary. Obviously, talking about Collins. Flossie says the same thing. Experience is the key in defence, and this is just what our forward line needed. The younger guys will gain a lot from him, says Ian. He also says, "How much is the club actually worth?" That's a really good question. I think the obvious
also one that I don't really think we can answer.
No, it's
there isn't a number. I don't think
as much as somebody is willing to pay for it. And then yeah, so we got that's about it, I think.
Oh, my mother should be watching. She always watches. She won't be commenting. I don't actually think she knows how to comment.
Shouting at the TV. That doesn't work. Yeah. That doesn't work.
I always promise her that I'll say hello. And should we? I'm just thinking as a little YouTube exclusive, is it maybe just worth mentioning that there have been discussions over the past few days in the Stacey West group chat about potentially doing something for deadline day again, but we shall keep it at that, shall we?
I can neither confirm nor deny that my contract has been extended for another deadline day special. We will have to see what goes on with that. But yeah, we're gonna have some conversations and maybe got a few things up our sleeve. So it's become expected at this point. I think there's probably
we've only done 2.
3, haven't we?
No, it was only last January that when McGrandle signed that we did the first one when we had Jez playing Hangman in the background.
Bloody hell!
That was only last January. I
thought we'd done 3. That shows how much.
Yeah. And have you even got your yellow tie?
I found my yellow tie when we moved, so I'm happy with that.
Good.
So yeah, but then of course we got final one. We got Mulwell is in, says good evening, chaps. How on earth are we doing? That's been a good little break with a nice little tease. So we'll come back in very shortly and we'll answer another couple of questions. So right. And there we go. Thank you to our sponsors for the week. We are now going to answer, I think, a couple more questions before jumping into the preview for the weekend. So, David in the Stacey West Discord asks, any changes to our pre-season predictions? Now, I think our predictions were predominantly around that 7th, 8th, 9th area, like, upper mid-table kind of area. And if I remember rightly, I think the podcast that we did where we discussed it, I think Gary might have tried to tip me into saying that we'd make the playoffs, and I think I said, sod it, yeah, why not? It was optimism. It was maybe not misplaced, but it was definitely optimistic. I don't think there's too much of a change. I think we're still on for that sort of 10th at the lowest at the end of the season. I think we've had our blip. There's a lot of clubs going through it. We're going to be talking about one very shortly. There are, every team has a blip in the division. I think we've had ours. I think playoffs might be out of reach, but then we said that this time last year, and ultimately we were proven right. But for a short while, we really believed it. Has yours changed at all, Charlie, since the start of the season?
Not changed. I think, as time does with any opinion, I think it's been certainly formed a little bit differently now, and it definitely looks a bit different because the league table looks different now to what I think most of us would have predicted at the start of the season. All you have to do is look at, again, a team that we will obviously be mentioning in a little bit, but the likes of Peterborough down in 19th place. I don't really think any of us predicted them to be quite that low coming into kind of end of January, start of February time. So changed, no, but I also don't think I'm like a set in stone with it as what I was. But I don't think I ever would be coming into January. It's a very close division. I think it's going to have a very close number of teams in that kind of 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way down to your kind of 12th and 13th. As long as we're in and around that mix, I'm happy. Even if we are sat in 12th place, sat in 13th place, where maybe we get less points than we did last season, and it looks as though we've gone backwards. Considering the overall season, the overall League One, I'd be really reasonably happy with that. It's just about taking everything into context, isn't it? Again, just as we were talking about earlier. Not changed.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, given the talk that we, I think me and Chris touched on, in terms of the finances of the division, going from a solid mid-table budget to what is now technically a bottom 6 budget, in the space of 12 months, despite the fact we've increased our budget. It's terrifying in a way, but yeah, I think outperforming the budget is a goal. Obviously, that's a goal within the football club. I think adjusting expectations depending on that. Obviously, we will never know the full ins and outs of every single penny that is spent. We'll get the accounts, but we won't necessarily understand where that money is going or where it's coming in. I think understanding that the playing budget is not going to be competing with the likes of those that are at the top will be an important thing. So, yeah, not necessarily changed, but maybe clarified a little bit. I think that's probably fair to say. Right, fine. Oh no, we've got two more questions. One is actually one that Phil has also asked here. Good evening, men. Do we think there will be any more arrivals in the window? Also, I hope our captain signs a new contract. Same question that was asked by Emma in the Discord, who said, do we think there'll be anything happening Imps-wise between now and the 3rd of February? Charlie, I'll let you pick this one up first.
So, in terms of business, it's always really difficult to predict, isn't it? Strikers, I don't know. I'm torn on, so I'm not going to answer strikers. Midfielders, I think we've probably now...
You just had one. Why do you want another one for?
Because I'm a Lincoln City fan. I'm a football fan. You know,
we need a striker on deadline day. It's the law.
Look, we can have a striker who scored 19 goals in the first half of the season. He's not a 20-goal a season striker, not yet. So we want another one. No, I don't know. Like I say, I always with that kind of like this kind of niggle in the back of your mind. Oh, we can look at another striker. Maybe. You know, Tyler's out. Rob Street's gone out on loan. We've only brought one in. That's two out. You know, there's always going to be that kind of little conversation in the back of your mind of maybe, but I doubt it, if I'm honest, unless it would be, again, a loan. But I don't really see the point in that now, unless Bailey Canamatri is out for the rest of the season, which obviously very much hope that isn't the case. Defense, I think, is where we're going to pick up. First of all, I wouldn't be too surprised to see us getting a left-footed centre-half, probably on a loan. Mm-hmm. Sean Rowan, as we know, is out of contract at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. That is going to be a big discussion point throughout the last couple of months of the campaign, I think, because he has been a standout player again this season. And, you know, he's worth his weight in gold in that defence. So I obviously don't want to be seeing him going, but I guess the club have got to start, and they already will have started, drawing up contingency plans for no matter what his situation is. I think the best way to do that might just be a loan, just give him a little bit of backup for the second half of the season, and then we can make either that loan a permanent in the summer if that's the way it goes, or we look to bring in somebody else as a full-time replacement in the summer for that kind of left-sided centre-half. I also think we do need a little bit more experience at the back as well, and again, it's something that we've touched on. I think we've got that in certain areas, but I don't think another body in there hurts. So maybe that's more of an experienced left-footed centre-half. I also wouldn't be too opposed to bringing in a little bit more of a full-back / wing-back on the left side, effectively a Tendai equal, but on the left-hand side. Although, you know, I love Rico Hackett, and I think he can play that kind of left wing, that attacking left wing-back position really well. I would just like the idea of having a bit more of a solid full-back / wing-back rather than a winger dropping into wing-back, just so then we've got other options in certain games if we feel like we need it. Yes, you could push Sean Rowan out there if we were to play a 5-back, but I don't really think that's his strongest position. You want him as left centre-half if you were playing about 5-3 or 5. So I just think that would give us a little bit more tactical flexibility. Outside of that, potentially another playmaker in the middle, but I doubt it. I honestly can't see that happening.
I can't see us signing another midfielder. We've got 12,000 of them. We don't need
actually. No, you are incorrect. It's actually only 11,999. Get it right.
Yeah, look, I would slightly disagree with you about the left-sided Tendai role, just because I think the shape that we sort of shift into when we drop out of possession, you do see Sean Rowan. Well, sorry, when you do see that sort of almost like a back four fill out with Sean in that spot. So I'm not 100% sold on that. But
my only thing is with that is it just would give us a little bit more tactical flexibility so that we don't have to play that system in all games. So, for example, sometimes if we are away against a Birmingham City, and actually realistically we are going to need to go there and set up maybe a little bit more deeper, a little bit more defensive, and just have an option of maybe a little bit more defensive solidity, having more of that kind of proper left back, left wing back role of a player could be a little bit more beneficial. I just think, and again, although I've not agreed with it too much, there has certainly been criticism pointed at Skubala and his kind of tactical nous over the past few months. I feel like any player that can give us a slightly different option so that he can experiment, especially in the second half of the season, we don't find ourselves in a playoff battle, and we begin over the last 6 weeks to make sure that we're setting up in a role and a structure that is setting ourselves up into a better position for this time next year. I feel like having that flexibility could be the key just to unlocking a little bit more success.
Yeah, I suppose if you've got an eye on the future, that's a fair enough shout. I think I agree with you in maybe a defender, a central defender, but I don't necessarily think the experience shout is the one that swings me into it. Obviously, we've got Adam Jackson there, we've got Paudie O'Connor there, both players that have played an awful lot of games. And let's not forget, Sean Rowan's only young, but he's played a hell of a lot of football for us. So I think a central defender for more cover tane anything else. I know at the moment I think we've got 4 for 3 spots with Tom Hamer out for a little while. I don't know how much further he's out for actually. So if he's on the verge of coming back, then maybe we wouldn't need one. But at that point, I think you're looking at. I think you're right in looking at a loan, at least initially. I don't think we need to sign another permanent central defender just yet. However, as Phil did say, it would be nice if Paudie signed a new contract. However, I can't see that necessarily happening. We'll obviously see. But yeah, I think in terms of signings, I think maybe a central defender will probably make it a decent window. And how ironic that we're talking about a decent window when we've signed a 34-year-old midfielder and a 34-year-old striker. Yeah, good times. And it was quite funny to see Jez mention that in the Collins press release.
It absolutely was.
Yeah. So, right. Final question from the Discord comes from John. He says, talk of new grounds have gone quiet for the moment. However, if you were designing a new ground for us, which stadium would you model it on?
I know.
Yeah, go on. Do your joke.
Yeah, it's not a joke. I would design it based on Sincil Bank. I get all the pros and all the cons of having a new stadium. I don't care what kind of financial benefit it can bring. I just want Sincil Bank, and I always want it to be Sincil Bank. I don't want some out-of-town stadium. I don't want a Shrewsbury town where you've got to walk for an hour from the train station to get to the ground, and it's in the middle of nowhere. But it's got a big car park. I just want Sincil Bank.
But it doesn't have a big car park. It's the car park's miles away. The car park's almost as far from the ground as the bloody train station is.
What, Shrewsbury's?
Yeah. It felt like
it. At the stadium. Where the hell did you park? It's literally at the stadium.
I think we parked at a B&M. It was a bit of a trek, if I remember rightly.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, no, I get disabled parking.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
So I don't care about all the pros of that. I always want to be at Sincil Bank or a Sincil Bank, one that is very much like it, surrounded by terraced houses. When you have quite literally got the bank right next to you, and you're a 10-minute walk from the train station. It's basically down one straight road. Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I'll always want. So it's a really poor answer to the question, but I don't care.
I think if you had to go for a modern sort of League One Championship stadium, I can't look too far past Rotherham's ground. I quite like that. But yeah, it has a bit more of a feel to it than a lot of the sort of normal like soulless bowls that are everywhere. Yeah, I'd go with that, but I think Sincil Bank's probably the right answer in that question. So anyway, as annoying as that is for me to say, I think you're right. Right, let's get into it. We're obviously back at home on Saturday. Speaking of Sincil Bank, we're playing in our one-off special kit on Saturday, and we host Peterborough United. Now, Charlie, Peterborough, last league win came on the December the 14th against Crawley. Since then, they've had 7 games with only 5 goals, and they've had a run that, well, some would probably say mirrored ours. They've not been great. And obviously the extra game was on Sky Sports the other night. I watched some of it. It was a poor performance from them, an absolutely brainless penalty at the end. Is this the worst Peterborough side that we've seen in recent seasons? And more importantly, can we finally beat them again?
What Peterborough have always managed to do over the past few years is sell players or let them go, sell some of their best performers, and still somehow manage to be in the playoffs or near enough year in, year out. And honestly, we hate them for it, but they do it well. So we can also kind of commend it, even though always in the back of your mind, you'll never get Sammy Schmodix out of the back of your mind. However, I do agree that this is probably one of our best chances in a long while of turning Peterborough over and managing to get a very, very strong result. There is a lot of discontent in that Peterborough United camp, and they do typically travel in numbers. So there is an opportunity here that a quick start from us, which is something that we've lacked in a good few games this season. But if we were able to get a quick start, we could very easily turn those travelling fans against their club this Saturday. And that's very much what I'm hoping can happen. Honestly, Darren Ferguson does seem to have lost a lot of faith from within his own fan base again. It's happened before. It's happening again. Darren McAntony as well. I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Now, of course, social media in itself is just this really weird microcosm of a fan base anyway, isn't it? So you can't exactly always state that what you see on there is true for the wide fan base. However, the amount of stick that he is getting is over and above anything that I think I've seen towards him in the past. But I also don't think he's necessarily helped himself with some of the comments that he's sort of made towards
Darren McAntony not helping himself. What world is this, Charlie?
Yeah, but he's very much turning on the fans as well, a lot more than he maybe has done before. And it just seems to be a big kind of bubbling cauldron of Peterborough bad. So honestly, I think we've got a really good opportunity on Saturday. Again, if we start quick and we can go get at them, they could be a little bit shell-shocked. And that's very much what we need. Because
it felt like we did that. It felt like we did that at the weekend, to be fair. We kind of, we came out and we looked, sorry, not the weekend. Which game was it? The Bolton game. We came out for the first 15 minutes and looked really, really impressive. I think if we can replicate that, admittedly, that was in the trophy. If we can replicate that performance for the first 15 minutes against a team that are very, very low on confidence, I think we've got a really good chance of going ahead and pulling something out of the game. What's
interesting is that something that Peterborough have done very well over the last couple of seasons. Was it last season? I think it was last season where up until Christmas they averaged 2 goals a game, and that was the norm for them. Now this year they are still very, very strong in attack. They've got the likes of Kwame Poku, who is just outstanding, but they have averaged 1.6, which is slightly more modest than what it was last year, but still 1.6 goals a game, which is 3rd in the division. However, it's their defensive solidity that effectively doesn't exist this year. They've conceded 1.8 goals a match, which puts them dead last in that, and it puts them dead last for clean sheets as well, where they've only had 1 all year, even though they're still playing a very attacking style of football, top for XG, 4th for possession. So when you're looking at those attacking metrics, you're like, okay, we're potentially going to be in for it on Saturday. But, we look at the fact that actually, although we've had issues throughout the season, we have still got a strong defence in terms of the individual players, especially as well. Our issue has been in front of goal more times than it hasn't been. But if we've potentially now brought in a new, prolific goal scorer in James Collins, and we're going to be given potentially more opportunities in front of goal on Saturday than we have been given all season, suddenly it turns into actually this is right for us to hopefully go ahead and get 2, 3, 4 goals. And honestly, me and Gaz were on the podcast this time last week, and the one thing we spoke about that we felt that we needed was a big win and a good few goals in a game to give us a confidence boost moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get that on Saturday against Peterborough as well, I genuinely think that could change the course of the second half of the season just with that one match. Now, of course, that's maybe just an optimist speaking, but honestly, I do feel like that could be a bit of a key again to unlocking the rest of the season just by getting at them quickly, getting a goal, and hopefully then getting 2 or 3 the more they put men forward and into our area.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I mean, we've said, I think we said privately and we said in the Discord as well, confidence breeds confidence. And the fact that we came away from Saturday, which was as was described as, a turgid game on Saturday, we came away from that with a win. We'd done a goal. We did an actual goal. And, coming away from that with a win, I just thought it was the kind of confidence boost that I think the lads needed. Let's talk about how we think we're going to line up, because Andy's asked in the chat, do we think the newbies will start on Saturday? It's a fair question. And obviously there is a little bit more to ask about that. So I think it's fairly obvious Collins will be in the squad. Will he be in the starting 11 with Cadamartri out at the moment? Well, presumably he's going to be out on Saturday. We haven't heard anything. What do you reckon we'll do in terms of a starting 11? A starting front line, let's start with. And then obviously we also have the situation with Jack Moylan up in the air as well. We haven't seen anything in terms of his recovery or, any statement on his injury. And will we see Sam Klukas in the team?
Sam Klukas, I will imagine, will be very kind of touch and go, hit and miss. I don't think he'd be starting even if he was ready to go, if I'm honest. I don't think there's anybody in that midfield that deserves to be displaced by him. It would, however, be fantastic to see him come on for the last 20 minutes against Peterborough and set up or score a goal, wouldn't it? But then we can say that about any new signing that we make, especially if their debut or, second debut was against Peterborough. In terms of Collins, in terms of that front line, I'm going to predict, and this is purely prediction that I will inevitably get wrong because that's normally how these go when it's a lineup. I'm going to predict that he won't start, will be on the bench, and will come on the 60-minute mark. I have a feeling that it'll be Ben House and, honestly, Freddie Draper again. I thought he played outstandingly. He was outstanding against Northampton. And I think the one thing that is honestly a little bit of a shame for Fred is the fact that he came back from Walsall this time last year. And he never really got a proper run of 5 to 10 games in a row in the starting 11. He had a couple of injuries throughout the second half of last season. Ben House came back with Joe Taylor firing. When we were playing 2 up top, a lot of the time it ended up being them 2, especially for the last kind of 10 games of the campaign. And then at the start of this season, he's been a squad player. He's gotten minutes. He's still got plenty of minutes, but he's not really been starting week in, week out. That's been given to Jovan. I would quite like to see what Fred can do with that opportunity of just getting a string of games together for us. But it's obviously now going to be difficult knowing that James Collins has just come in. Yeah. So I want, and I think Fred will start with Ben House, but I also wouldn't be too surprised to see James Collins come in, potentially with those 2 as well, and Ben House drops into that role just behind.
Yeah, I think that was it. It's almost a decent fit, isn't it? We've got James Collins coming in. We've got Freddie Draper, who had an excellent game on Saturday. Got Ben House, who you can't. He didn't do anything particularly wrong on Saturday. Obviously had the shot where which came off the post for the goal. But I think if you have Collins and Draper up front with House in that 10 role, you've then kind of solved the Jack Moylan problem. Obviously Tom Bayliss is going to miss out if that is the case, and I'd feel bad for Tom in that instance because I do like Tom Bayliss. I thought he looked really good when he came on as well on Saturday. I think he steadied the ship as Gaz and Chris said. So yeah, I'd feel a bit bad for Bayliss, but I think if you're going for an attacking minded, aggressive start, how much more aggressive can you get than James Collins and Freddie Draper with Ben House just behind them? I don't think you're going to be able to get too much more aggressive from that with our current squad. Other than that, I think the lineup pretty much picks itself. Flossie does make the point here that Collins has only played 2 games this season, so maybe
I believe that's only started 2 games. I do believe he has appeared in 20.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. There we go. So, yeah, that's that. I mean, obviously, Peterborough being Peterborough, they have made a few signings. Where we're looking at Sam Hughes from Stockport, Carl Johnson coming from Fleetwood, and then of course Teo Eden from Charlton. Teo gave away, I think it was Teo that gave away the penalty on Tuesday night, if I'm correct in thinking. But apparently started fairly well. That aside, I think he's had 2 games and he's looked decent. In the same vein as TJ, I'm glad that Teo's getting or going to be getting regular football again. But for 90 minutes at the weekend, he won't get any sympathy from me.
It's also just worth noting with that, by the way, and I don't know if it was ever discussed on the podcast or even publicly at all at Lincoln, and I didn't know this, but Teo Eden was also subject of a £500,000 bid from Peterborough when he moved to Blackburn. Now, I do believe that was the figure he moved to Blackburn for. So, by the sounds of it, they were the 2 clubs, and he chose Blackburn in probably understandable fashion at the time as well. But that shows that Peterborough were clearly interested for a while, and considering their radar in terms of picking up good players that they know that they can move on to higher divisions, it's certainly an interesting one that they have looked at him ever since his first stint with us.
Yeah, no, I wasn't aware of that. So no, it's, there we go. So right, yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if Peterborough currently have this. It almost seems to be like they potentially be having the same conversations that we've had, but around identity and around what are they trying to do, how are they trying to play, and it feels like their confidence is potentially at rock bottom at the moment. Like you say, Ferguson's lost a lot of the fans, McAntony's lost a lot of the fans, and I think when that starts to get toxic, I think that's just a bit of a dangerous one for Peterborough. What can we expect? And what's your prediction going to be, Charlie? If we can keep it relatively brief, because I think we're on just over an hour now. So,
it will be 3-0 either way.
Oh bloody hell! That's a prediction and a half, isn't it? I'm going to go, yeah, all right, sod it. Let's go 3-0, but I'm going to stick my colours to the mast. I'm going to say it'll be 3-0 to Lincoln. I'm feeling a little bit more confident after Saturday in that, we've managed to grind out a result on a pitch that we didn't necessarily enjoy playing on. We're back at the bank. We've got a pitch that we know. Hopefully the tails are up a little bit. So, yeah, sod it. Let's give it a go. They're not in a good spell, so... 3-0 Lincoln. Why the hell not? Right. Well, I think that's the game just about covered. There is one more thing that we do have to discuss before we wrap up, and that is, of course, on Friday at Tension Twisted Realities in Lincoln. Gaz is doing an evening with Graham Bressington and John Schofield. Promises to be a hell of a night. I'm really looking forward to this one. As I think somebody mentioned, Scoey came to our the last live event that we did at the club, and we had a bit of time with him off the mic for just the people that were there. And it was brilliant. I think him and Phil Hubbard were superb on the night. And I know Gaz is a big Bressy fan. So he's really, really looking forward to this one. And it should be a really good night. I think tickets are still on sale. There's a few left if you want to go and grab one. The address is tensiontwistedrealities.co.uk, and you should be able to find it from there. I think it's advertised on there. But it's also on the stacywest.net site. So get on there, have a look. It's being pushed. I think Gaz pushing it on Twitter and Facebook as well. So yeah, it's going to be a really good night. Q&A, I think it starts at 6:45 and it's going to go until they close at 10. So, they'll probably have a few beers behind them. And the more beers I imagine the more beers that flow, the better the stories are going to be. It's not been recorded for a podcast or anything like that. So if you want to get involved and see what the guys have to say and some of their memories of being at the bank, whether that's, Bressie in his playing days or Scully in his playing or managerial days, I think it'll be a really, really good night. So get yourself involved, come down, say hello, have a pint, win something on the raffle. That's usually how these things go for me. It's all good. Charlie's just rolled his eyes so far back. I think he's been able to see again. Right. So
I was just trying to find my hairline.
Indiana Jones couldn't find that one, mate. Right. I think that's probably a decent spot to wrap up. Yeah, as I say, we will be back on Sunday, looking back at the Peterborough game and looking ahead to everything else that's going on in LN5. But until next time, as always, we'll see you guys later. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.